it's always fun to use the mic.
I'm 65 years old. I almost skipped my first 21 years of life, but I started teaching in Carlisle, Mass. in 1980. I was before some people were born. And I love kids. I love teaching. I didn't think I was good at it. I went back and got another graduate degree at Smith and got an MSW. And then my chronology is very brief. I've watched the culture change to a place where I think it's not good for kids and families. And I'm sorry there aren't 2,400 parents here, but there are 12. And Judge Broderick has become a blessed and very good friend of mine, and I would like to talk with you about kids and their mental health. There's a kid here, so he can talk about how he was. And then, more importantly, talk about solutions. So my chronology is O.J. Simpson trial 1984 struck me as divisive, weird. Who remembers it? What kind of vehicle did he drive in? White Bronco. Sort of divided the country. This young man doesn't remember it, but I thought, this is awfully odd. I think I was 34 years old. And then in 1999, I was a school social worker at Souhegan. All the adults in the building were crying because something happened west of Mississippi. Does anybody know what that was? Colorado, 1940. Columbine. All of us grown-ups were crying. It was the first really well-known school shooting, and we were crying because of one of the themes I think Judge and I will touch on. It just didn't feel safe. And then in 01, we had a catastrophe in Manhattan. And then we've had a 21-year cavalcade into dysfunction, disunity, pressure, and we're going to get into it. It's not a happy talk, but it's a talk that ends up being really happy if any or all of you guys want to take it to the next step. So Jeff Levin out of Newton, Mass. I have a bad Boston accent. I used to try and hide it, but I've given up on that stuff. So I've been working with kids for 42 years, and I want to introduce my friend, beloved colleague, Justice John Broderick. Thank you, Judge.
Can you guys hear me? Yes? Okay. First of all, thanks for being brave enough to come out. This is not atypical, by the way. Sad to say it's not atypical, but I admire you for coming out. Jeff and I have been doing this work, some of it together, some of it independently. And it's turned out to be the most important work of my entire life. And I've had some amazing opportunities in my lifetime, not the least of which is being Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the state. I was Dean of the Law School at UNH. But the reason I'm here tonight means more to me than anything I've ever done. For the last 6 years now, I've been traveling and speaking wherever I'm invited to talk about mental health. I've been to 300 middle schools and high schools all through New England. I've talked to almost 100,000 kids grades 6 through 12. No one in New England has ever done that. Not because I'm special, just because that's what I've done. And over that time, I've hugged more kids in that age bracket with wet eyes than anyone alive. So I'm not a clinician, I admit that. But I was a trial lawyer for 22 years. I'm very good at listening. I listened to what witnesses said. And then the state of New Hampshire paid me for 15 years to be an appellate judge where I listened and wrote opinions. So I think I'm pretty good at discerning what I'm hearing and what kids are telling me. And so we're going to start with a film. It's about 8 minutes long, and Jeff Levin actually produced it. And it's kids, many of them from our own state. You probably won't know any of them, but it's not important. What's important is they're kids. And unlike prior generations, including my own, a baby boomer, kids today are just painfully honest about subjects that most of us never dare talk about. It's one of the reasons I love this generation, I mean that. They have shared with me over the last 6 years what they tell me they could never share with their parents. We can find solutions, but not in auditoriums that are largely empty. And that needs to change too. So you have my respect for being here tonight. And I know there are some people perhaps watching on live stream, but we need community conversations to address the issues that I'm hugging and seeing. So what I'd like to do is start with the video. It's about 8 minutes. And then when that's over, I'm going to get up and speak for a few minutes. Jeff will do the same. And then if there's interest, we'd love to have some discussion. And you don't have to give us your name. You don't have to tell us about your children. We're not here for that. But we are here because, as Yogi Berra might have said in my childhood, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Change is needed. So with that, I'll step aside and let the video play, and then I'll be back up. Thank you.
What are the most stressful things you find about being a kid today in the 2000s?
The pressure of being successful is definitely one of them.
Junior year, especially, is really difficult. I can speak for everyone when I say this, that everyone feels stress, and realistically they shouldn't.
I think that a lot of people like smoke, do drugs. Yeah, that are our age.
People judging other people. Like, judging here is so bad.
The things people say, like the racism, like, you know, people like they like judge you for like what you do, or like how you do your hair, or like what kind of shirt you wear.
We don't talk about like how some things that you see online, that you see every single day, are just, you shouldn't expect yourself to live up to those standards.
I feel like I'm kind of never like well rested. Like I feel like there's always something that has to be done. Like there's no actual time to like relax.
Just balancing everything that needs to get done with school and work and all the extra activities that we're trying to do, and then not having enough rest.
And it's kind of because I feel like the older generation didn't grow up with this sort of stress, and they never experienced it, and they don't really know how to deal with it.
You don't need a big sign to tell you that that person wants to kill themselves or they're not happy with themselves. Little signs can just tell you a person not eating, a person not talking to their friends as much, avoiding school, not cleaning your room. Little signs like that, people need to notice that.
Just kids want to live and have fun and do other things to school, and that there's more to success than getting all A's and graduating with 5 hours and going to the best college you can. Some of the most successful people in the entire world are successful because they do things that they like and they are good at it. And I can tell you, a lot of people don't like school, and it's probably for the best if every now and then you ease off the gas pedal and let them find time to do something that they enjoy and that they would actually like to pursue.
You know, people always assume that you're going to have your phone on you, and it seemingly is becoming more and more of an issue when you don't. When obviously we know from both empirical studies and just from personal experience that having your phone on you can be dangerous, and it can lead to a lot of problems, both mentally and physically. And so it's unfortunate that we all feel this dire connection to our phones.
We never really experienced going out and being individuals without being in contact with our parents when we actually had the abilities to take on those responsibilities and freedoms. I would say, especially in school and in the environment that we're in, there's definitely always that feeling to be perfect in almost all aspects of life. And I see so many people around me who are getting into colleges, getting into their dream schools, doing what they've always wanted to. And it doesn't even seem like they're that much happier, like feeling accomplished.
And also the time that I do find myself where it's unscheduled, I find myself worrying about the time that is scheduled.
To try not to put too much pressure on your kids. I think the most important thing for parents to do is to at least give kids the right values and morals that you want them to grow up living with. But then outside of that, you should really try to let kids be kids and let them figure some stuff out for themselves. We live in a time that it's so hard to make mistakes because we see people that once you make a mistake, you get canceled or whatever it is. And you have to find ways to allow your kids to make mistakes in settings that isn't on the internet or isn't something public, so that they're able to grow up and learn and become their own person and figure out what they do and do not like to do. Because if not, then they're just going to follow what the internet tells them so they could avoid being canceled and do what they think they want when really they never grew up figuring out what they truly love.
Okay, it goes back to the baby touching the hot stove. You can tell him as many times as you want not to touch it, but he's not going to know it's bad unless he actually touches it and, yanks his hand back. And I think that's kind of been lost on our generation. And,
Eli, do you think sometimes parents are living vicariously through their children?
Yeah, 100%. I think that not only are they living vicariously through the children, but they're trying to nitpick every mistake that they might have made when they were children. And if the kids never get the opportunity to make those mistakes, I'm not saying, let your kid walk into an utterly dangerous situation, but there has to be some sort of balance and some sort of leeway where you let the kid understand what it means to do this and what it means to make that mistake so that he doesn't do it again.
It's all about the students being better than each other rather than if we all learned it together.
So I thought of the train as, you can really sum it up to anything. You can say it's the train of life, the train of society, big words, but I think truthfully what it is it's a constant pressure to be moving forward on one track, and everybody's kind of just trying to stay on. You're not the conductor of your own train. You're not laying the tracks. You don't know where it's going. It's at a set speed during finals week. The train's going really fast, and you just have to do your best. Some people fall off the train. Some people stay on, hanging on by a thread. But the real issue is that it's not like everybody has their own train, which is the way it should be. It's not everybody's laying their own tracks. It's one train. We don't really know who it's set by. We don't know why it's going so fast, but that's what it is, and you kind of just have to keep up. And that's a real big pressure for kids. It seems more and more that our generation experiences general anxiety. It's not really clear where it's coming from. There's no pinpointed action that was taken to get there. So for me and Isaac, I think that it can be, the stress of a test or that's one thing, but just you show up to school and it's an anxious place. Everybody around you is anxious first of all, so that rubs off. And just you feel like you're in that building to do something and you don't really know what it is. And so it's a general anxiety that feels very, very stifling. And it's very disorienting because, like I said, if you don't know where it's coming from, it's really hard to treat. You can't just say, oh, this is what you should do. Talk to somebody about this because you don't know why it's happening. It just is. And it's affecting everybody around you.
But I think the larger problem here is the fact that people are just feeling anxious every day. And it doesn't have to be because of a scarring experience or a tragic event. It's just how we grow up as anxious people. And honestly, part of it could be the phone. It could be the constant chase to be better.
But I think that the issue is that we kind of let the technology dictate the pace. We let this come into the world, and we weren't prepared for it. And so you see that now, that people are scrambling to get a hold of this. People are just now realizing that Facebook is invasive and it invades your privacy. That's been going on already now for 13 years. And the major issue, I mean, we talk about the train analogy, is that one of the conductors up there is technology.
The last two boys on that film were co-captains of their hockey team at their high school, and one of them was president of his senior class. They're really smart kids. They were honest too. Let me just say at the outset, the reason I'm here tonight is not because I have a degree, as Jeff Levin does, but because I had mental health issues in my own family some 20 years ago that put my family on the front pages in this state, put me in the national news and my family. And thank God we've healed and come through it. But I learned a lot. But I didn't do anything about it. I'm a baby boomer, not that you could have ever guessed that. And the world I'm from, the world I grew up in, no one ever talked about emotional or social health or mental health. They just didn't talk about it. They're talking about it now. These kids are. This generation of young people, I have my highest respect. I love these kids. They're smarter than I was. They're more worldly wise than I was. They're the least judgmental generation of Americans in the history of the United States. And they deserve our kudos. But they're also dealing with more emotional stress than any prior generation. And you don't just have to take my word for it. Let me give you a couple of statistics that find it hard to get to the front page above the fold, but I hunt these statistics everywhere I go. And all of the statistics I'm going to give you are pre-COVID. COVID was not a good event, as we all know, and it caused a lot of anxiety and depression among young people, middle-aged people, and old people. I get all that. But I'm going to give you some pre-COVID numbers. The Center for Disease Control issues a questionnaire to public high school kids every 2 years, all across the United States. 70 public high schools in New Hampshire took this test in 2019. I don't know whether they use it in Pinkerton or whether they have some other test. I didn't know these existed until 5 years ago. This is 2019, looking back 12 months to 2018. The tests are taken by high school students. They're anonymous. What is your year in school? What is your age? What is your sex? That's all they disclose. Let me give you the statistics, the national statistics. 2019, looking back. 46.6% of high school girls in our country are depressed. 26% of high school boys. And the question isn't, are you depressed? The question is, have you felt sad or hopeless for 2 consecutive weeks or longer in the last 12 months so that you weren't able to engage in normal everyday activity? I asked the head of psychiatry, Jonathan Hitchcock, someone I respect greatly, is that a good way, I said, to ask the depression question? He said, it's an excellent way to ask. 26% of high school girls in the United States, in that same 2019 survey, said they had given serious consideration, that's the question, to ending their own lives in the previous 12 months. 15% said they had made plans to do that. 11.3% of high school girls nationally have attempted suicide 1 or more times in the previous year. Are we okay with that? Can you imagine if 46% of high school girls in America had COVID or cancer or diabetes? it would be a major story. It would fill auditoriums. It would fill auditoriums. Over the last 6 years, I have been to so many schools. I've talked to the kids about my own family's journey, my own mistakes, my own ignorance. But I'm not ignorant now, by the way. And one thing I love about this generation is when you are vulnerable to them, they open to you. I wish you could all be with me on those days when this grandfather, who no one knows and will never see again, comes to the auditorium or the gymnasium, and they often line up to talk to me. I've talked to high school athletes, bigger than I am, football players, who start crying. I said to them, have you told your parents? Have you talked to your parents? Oh, I could never tell my parents, I said. Mental health is something you can't talk about. It happens so often. I was in Maine a couple of weeks ago in a community that I had never heard of. And my guess is you wouldn't have heard of it either. I thought it was a made-up town. They have a high school with almost 600 students. I spoke in their gymnasium in the center of the gym floor with a microphone like the one I'm holding. I spoke for 35 minutes. When I finish speaking, they stand up and applaud. I don't mean politely. They don't know me, they're not applauding me, I know that. But what they are saying is, I agree with this guy. Why aren't we talking about it? What are we afraid of? In the time I've been doing this, I'm sure I've had kids with what we would consider to be classic mental health problems caused by DNA or chemical imbalance or adverse childhood experiences. I know they're out there in greater numbers than you think, by the way. But most of what I've seen and hugged are kids who are so anxious, so afraid to fail, however they describe and define that. Those two young guys at the end of that film, very successful in the high school, you heard them. There's a low level of anxiety here every day. I don't even know why. This generation of kids are on their iPhones 6, 7, 8 hours a day. That comes at a price, by the way. And now schools are saying, well, we'll have really slick social emotional curriculum in our school. That'll take the place of normal growth. And some of those programs I'm sure are valuable, but it may be true in your life, it was true in mine. My social emotional growth happened eyeball to eyeball. My mother, looking back, was probably overprotective in her day. Now she looks neglectful, my mother. When I was in the 4th grade, I used to walk home for lunch. I didn't have a phone, I didn't have a police escort, I didn't have a dog. I walked home. My mother, who worked, would somehow find her way home every new time. She and I could share a sandwich. I thought that was pretty special. And then she'd go back to work. She didn't drive me back to school, I walked to school. And when I got back there, she didn't call the principal to see if I had arrived safely. I must have learned independence and resilience and self-reliance. We're shrinking kids. We are starving childhood. It's not coming from a bad place, please know, I know that. Parents love their kids just as much as my mother and father loved me. But as Jeff Levin says, and I love this guy, you're going to hear from him, he's so spot on, this guy. He said to me one day, you know what we're doing, John? We're preparing the road for the child, not the child for the road. He's exactly right. Kids today are over-organized, over-competing, over-structured, over-pressured, not coming from a bad place. And to some extent, I understand it. But I'm hugging the consequences of that. You heard those two young men trying to run to catch the train. They don't even know where it's going, who laid the track. They know they need to be on it. It was not my life. John Clement and I were on a podcast a few weeks ago with 3 students at Broderick College. I think any parent here at Pinkerton or any high school would say, I'm really proud my son or daughter is at that school. They were really honest. I love kids. And they were all juniors. And the boy said during that podcast, I went to a pretty competitive high school in Massachusetts. I knew the town, and I know he's right about it. And he said what they used to do, I understand they do it here too. He said they used to post our grades to a platform every day. I said, I couldn't have survived in that world. I said, what did you do when you got to 65 on the chemistry quiz? He said, well, those were tough days. You know what I did? I put it in my book, it never went home. And I had to do better on the next test, so I got that average up. My parents checked my grades at report card time. That's an old-fashioned idea. One of the girls on that video, she was a junior at Middlebury College. She said, every girl on this campus has an eating disorder or an exercise addiction. Are we okay with that? Do you realize from 2007 to 2017, the rate of suicide for people ages 10 to 24, the wonder years of life, increased 56%. You think that's happening for no reason? We are professionalizing childhood. I don't know why we're doing that, but that's what we're doing. You can believe that or not, I'm hugging it every time I go out. Before COVID, I was speaking at a middle school in this state. I was speaking to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade kids, 600 of them. I must have looked like the oldest person I'd ever seen, certainly the oldest one that ever spoke to them. And the people in the front of the room were 6th graders. They looked like they were 5 years old, so that was pretty alarming if you're me. But I gave the same talk I gave to high schoolers. And when I finished speaking, the 6th graders, having no one else to look at, to get a signal from, they stood up and applauded. When I was in the 6th grade listening to me, I was like, who is this guy? What is he talking to me about? These kids understand it. They understand it. And when I was leaving that day, I said to the dean of students, what's it like here academically? He said, well, there's a lot of pressure on these kids. So let me give you an example. We just had a grading period that ended on a 6th grade boy, and the mother and father came in to see the teacher. And he said the mother put the report card down on the teacher's desk and said, those are not my son's grades. And so what did the teacher say? He said, no, ma'am, those aren't his grades. And then the father said, for the money we're paying here, we can't accept those grades. I don't think my parents would have said that. When I was in the 6th grade 100 years ago, and they used to have cursive penmanship. If you know what that is, you're showing your age. And I was a left-handed kid, so I could barely open a door with my right hand. That's how pathetic I was. And so I wasn't doing well in cursive penmanship. And so the 6th grade teacher said to me, John, if you don't get better at this, you're going to have to change and write with your right hand. And I knew that wouldn't have gone well. But I didn't worry about it. I had no protective mother. So I went home and I said, Mom, you won't believe what happened at school today. So I told her. And she said, well, that can be solved pretty quickly. I thought she's going to go see the teacher. She said, you better start writing more clearly, or you're going to have a hard time writing with your right hand. Today, my mother might have sued the school or called the principal. What is that? We are so intent upon our child's success that we want to tell them who they are, what they are, and what they'll do before they even know who they are. What is the rush? We all grew up. Most people take themselves wherever they choose to go. I became a lawyer because I watched Perry Mason on television. That's why. My family didn't know any lawyers, there were no lawyers in my neighborhood, but my parents supported my dreams. My dreams. During COVID in my town, and I understand that it was a bad time, believe me, I do. And so at high school graduation last year, people started putting signs up. I don't know if that happened here or not, but I saw a lot of proud parent signs. I'm a proud parent of a high school graduate. Oh, my parents were proud too, but they didn't feel they had to put a sign up. I knew they were proud because they told me that. And one of the signs was up, and right after graduation it went down, and the new sign at that house said, WPI, Worcester Polytechnic, 2024. I said, what do I do with that? I don't even know these people. I mean, they're going to WPI. What am I supposed to do with that data? In a neighboring town was a big, big house and 3 descending embankments. And they had someone come, I assume, it was beautifully done. And they cut the lawn in a way, there was a big S in the middle of the embankment with the Syracuse colors. So somebody had been admitted to Syracuse, I would assume. Well, what should I do with that? What if there was a kid in the neighborhood who got rejected at Syracuse? But the best sign was in my own neighborhood. They put a sign up. I took a picture of it because I thought it was a once in a lifetime. It was a picture of a little boy, looked 5 years old. It said, proud parent of a kindergarten graduate, class of 2021. I don't know about you, but when I was in kindergarten, they didn't say we had classes. When I learned to use the seesaw without falling off and made a capital A, my mother thought I was a genius. That was it. What are we doing to kids? I told this story, it's not about me, but it's about the change in the culture. I went to Holy Cross College in Worcester. I applied to 3 schools, by the way. Someone said, why didn't you apply to more? I said, my mother said we couldn't afford more than 3 schools. And I got into Holy Cross. If I had said to my parents, you know what I'd like to do? I'd like to go downtown, buy a bucket of purple paint, and put a big HC on my front lawn. My mother would have said, don't you dare do that. But more importantly, I never would have thought to do it, nor would they. And when I went to Holy Cross from a public high school, I had no idea really how I would do there, but I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, whatever that meant. I wanted to be a trial lawyer, because that's what Perry Mason was. It's true, by the way. And so my first grade at Holy Cross was in theology, and I was a Baltimore catechism kid. I didn't know much about theology. And so I got my first grade there, first college grade. My seat number was 56. My grade was 53. Not exactly how I hoped to start out. So I said, well, maybe I won't be a priest. And then I said, maybe I'll be an economist. Maybe that's my strength. And so I had a course in macroeconomics. And in late October, I got my first grade there, and that was a 48. So I was averaging really around 50. And I remember calling my parents early November, and my mother said, your dad and I are so excited you'll be coming home. I thought, you have no idea what you're saying. I may be living at home pretty soon. I'm going to fly out of this place. I got the courage to tell my parents about my grades at Thanksgiving dinner. You know what my mother said? She said, well, I suppose you're going to have to do better than that. I graduated 12th in my class in Holy Cross. Not because my mother called the school, complained to the teachers. I knew I had to do better, and so I did. We're not willing to give kids that break today. We're not letting kids grow as they grow. That's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm hugging. It doesn't have to be that way. This generation of kids is growing up in a world that none of us can really understand. Some principal told me when I started doing this, John, if you haven't been in a high school in the last 10 years, you've never been in a high school. He wasn't talking about the building. That's right, it's true. These kids feel a pressure to succeed. Those two boys you saw at the end of that film, I described to them on the film what my high school years were like. That I had free time, I went to football games with my friends. I usually left homework till Sunday night. I said, can you relate to that? I said, I can't relate to a single thing you're saying. A hockey player, the captain of the team, one of those two boys, said, I'm at the rink every morning at 6:30, I shut my light out at 11:30 at night. I couldn't relate to that either. I went to a high school in southern Maine. A girl waited 45 minutes to tell me what I'm going to tell you. She came up to me, she looked so sad, and she said, I'm in all advanced placement classes here at the high school. I was trying to get her to smile. I said, oh my God, there should be a law against people like you. Nobody should be allowed to be that smart. She barely cracked a smile. She said, it's not that good, you know. I said, what do you mean? She said, I have no life. Was that your junior year in high school? I have no life, she said. I study every night till 11:30. I said, why are you doing that? She said, for my parents. I said, look, I don't know your parents. I'm sure they love you very much. Have you talked to them about what you told me? She said, no. I said, will you promise me you'll talk to them? And she didn't say a word. She stepped closer, hugged me, and then ran down the hallway. I guarantee you she never spoke to them. But I also guarantee you that parents might put up one of those signs when she graduates. Last story, and I'm going to turn it over to Jeff Lovett. This has become the most important work of my lifetime. I don't have any right to feel a fiduciary duty to kids who are not my own, but I do. I do. At that middle school that I told you about, when the 6th graders stood up and applauded, the principal said after my talk, would you go to the lunchroom? There were 600 kids. They came in at 22-minute increments. They started lunch like 11:15 in the morning. It was shocking. Anyway, so I thought, well, I'll go before she asked me, but this would be really awkward. I'm the oldest person by multiples in that room. And they all knew each other, and they shared life together. They didn't know me from Adam. So I said, this will be awkward. But I went anyway. I figured I'll get a cold drink, and then I'll slink out. I didn't get a chance to sit down for the first 5 lunch periods. Kids would line up. Kids would talk to me. One girl said to me, I freak out if I don't get 100 on every paper. I said, oh my goodness, I can solve that problem. She said, how do you do that? I said, your standards are way too high. You should adopt my middle school standards. If I got an 85 or above, I thought that was great. I said, I only got 5 100s in high school. She said, how would you know that? I said, if you only had 5, believe me, you remember all of them. So I sat down at the beginning of the 5th lunch period with 8 8th grade girls. You can imagine how thrilled they were to have lunch with the old guy. And I found out that was the only time during the day they could use their iPhones. So I was interfering with that sustenance. So I said to them, hey, do you guys all have iPhones? And they looked at me like, oh my God, does he think we don't have iPhones? They said, yes, we do. I said, let me ask you guys, how many hours a day are you on them? 8th grade. I said, well, I'll be totally honest. It ranges anywhere from 5 to 8 hours. 5 to 8 hours? There's no social emotional growth on the screen, by the way. I said, are you using it for schoolwork? And they looked at me like, is he kidding? They were honest about that. One little girl didn't say anything, and I said, you didn't answer, how about you? She said, well, I'm only on my iPhone an hour or 2 a day. I said, that's good, it's good for you. She said, well, not really, because if I'm on more than that time, I get really depressed. I see what other families are doing, I'm not getting enough likes, no one likes my pictures. I didn't have that stress growing up. This generation lives in it 24/7. And then I asked them a question that was like the jackpot question. These are 8th grade girls. I said, hey, I understand your generation is stressed. Is that true? Now they're all smiling. I see the braces. Like, wow, the old guy is smarter than we thought. They said, oh, we're so stressed. Was that your 8th grade life? I was scared to death with a math test, but that was about it. I wasn't stressed in my middle class hours. So I said, well, why are you so stressed? So they pointed to the girl sitting next to me. They identified her as the best athlete, boy or girl in the school. She said, I'll tell you why we're stressed. We're always trying to accomplish the next thing, so we'll be eligible for the thing after that. Not my life. I said to her, hey, you must be a great athlete. Your friends tell me that. What's your sport? She said, I play soccer. So I said, you must love soccer. You know what her answer was? Well, it takes a lot of my time. I wasn't expecting that. I'm not a parent. I have to be careful. I said, well, I suppose you don't have to play soccer. Oh, she said, I have to play. I'm the best player. They won't let me step down. If I'd been able to say to that 8th grade kid, guess what? You don't have to do that anymore. If you don't want to do it, don't do it. She would have hugged me. The last image I want you to have is from a film I saw recently called Chasing Childhood. It's making a lot of points that I've seen. And I want you to go back to your grade school life and you answer this question. It's a section of the film where there's a woman in her 40s. She's sitting in a grade school library in a very upper middle class town in Connecticut, Wilton, Connecticut. About 8 kids. And she asks this question: how many of you go out and play when you get home from school? If you ask that question to baby boomers, every single hand would have gone up. When she asked that question of those kids, not one hand went up. Not one hand went up. And they didn't even seem embarrassed that they weren't raising their hands. They didn't understand what that question meant. And then she asked what they were doing. Well, on Monday I have soccer practice. On Tuesday I have violin lessons. On Wednesday I have tutors. It only lasts 12 years and then it's gone. It's not because parents don't love their children, but we need to provide space and time for kids to figure out who they are, what they want to do, and what they want to become. My parents could have said to me, don't be silly, that's a television show. Turned out to be my entire career. I never had a tutor. I quit piano lessons in the 5th grade. My mother said, okay, you don't have to take them if you don't want. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not saying we don't need to have kids who are achieving. I'm not saying that. I achieved. I didn't have this stress. These kids will achieve too. These kids are so amazing, but they feel like they're in a vice, a lot of these kids. I want to introduce Jeff Levin to you. I met Jeff Levin now maybe 2.5, 3 years ago. He was introduced to me through Tom Raffio, who's the head of Delta Dental in New Hampshire. Tom called me and said, "You got to meet Levin. The guy's amazing." And so Jeff and I got together for a cup of coffee. He with the degrees from Dartmouth and Smith and Boston College, and me with no degree in that area. But I had learned a lot from kids. And oddly, he agreed with almost everything I was telling him. He seemed a little amused that I didn't realize that. He's been seeing it growing and growing and growing. He deals with kids one-on-one. He deals with sports teams. I've been in rooms with him when he's talking to kids. It's amazing. The years melt away. He's one of them, and he asks really open-ended, solid questions, and kids respond to him. What Jeff Levin is doing and seeing through the eyes of a therapist is what I'm hugging in schools. So I really encourage you to listen to him, because at the end of the day, if anything's going to change, it's going to change because enough members of the school community say, you know, maybe that's right. Maybe we should talk about that. Maybe we need to deal with that. As I said, sadly, it's not a criticism of this school, so please understand that. If this were a sports banquet tonight or a sports award program, be mobbed. Athletes aren't immune either, by the way. Athletes aren't immune either. I know that. I hug them, and they sure too. Anyway, I want to introduce Jeff Levin.
The opportunity we have, I tend to be a glass half empty guy. I grew up in an alcoholic family. That was my habit of mind. And I could focus on the fact that there are 787 empty seats in here instead of focusing on the fact that there are 2 students in here with their parents and about 10 or a dozen parents that came to this. And the opportunity we have in this community at Pinkerton or in Derry or the towns of the kids that go to this school is life-saving in 2 ways. At WPI, which John mentioned, and I don't know if you saw the article in the Globe around Christmas, but by Christmas time, 8 boys had killed themselves, WPI students. And I spoke to Jack Baker, who was a senior there, who grew up in Shrewsbury. And at that time, and he was mentioned in the Globe article, so this is public knowledge. If you Google Boston Globe WPI suicides, you'll see the article. Jack, after the 5th, posted a video one day, 29-minute video, on Instagram to all the WPI, to his colleagues, and said, listen, this is ridiculous. I myself have attempted to die by my own hand. I've been in the hospital. And if you need help, I want you to DM me. I bet the judge doesn't know what DM stands for, but I figured that out. That's, what is it? Direct message, is that it? DM. DM me because I want to help you, because the grown-ups aren't getting the job done. He posted the video, took a shower, Jack told me, and when he came back to look at his iPhone, he had 19 messages from people at WPI that wanted to talk to him. Since Christmas, 3 more boys have died by their own hand at WPI. We have an opportunity that's life-saving to prevent that from happening. But also, and I'm going to tell you a story, and I've watched 2 episodes of Perry Mason since you said to me that that's what inspired you. Who remembers Perry Mason? I think you might, ma'am. Coach does. Does any of you remember? Ba-da-da-da-da, ba-da-da-da-da. When I was 11, I was lying in my bed, and my Nana May had bought me a RCA Victor stereo clock radio with a speaker on either side, 1967. So the Beatles had made a few records, and they were stereo. But a few of us old guys remember mono records. Julie, you don't remember mono. You do remember. You do. And this radio sounded like heaven to me. And one night when the Red Sox were playing the Cardinals in the World Series in 1967, my brother said to me, if you don't listen to the Red Sox game, it's proof positive that you are a fill in the blank. It might have been a 6-letter word that begins with R. So I thought, I got to listen to this Red Sox game. So I turned on AM, I think it was 850. WHDH, Red Sox. I'm laying in my bed, I'm 11, I hear, now batting for the Red Sox, left field, number 8. I know Broderick knows it. Nobody know, who? Carl Yastrzemski. So my father had started abusing alcohol, I was 11. I didn't know much at 11, but I wanted to pretend I was Carl Yastrzemski. So I lifted my left elbow in the bed, like he did, and I pretended for a minute I was Carl Yastrzemski, and it gave me a couple of minutes of comfort, you know what I mean? But I darn wanted to turn this thing on FM, and this was a Friday night, and I turned it to FM, and I moved the dial around. It's analog, you know, no digital. So I hear, now yeah, FM 104.1, WBC, and I got to 89.7, and I heard, blink da da ba ba, I got a sweet little angel, baby, and I love the way you spread your wings. The next morning, that was B.B. King, by the way. The next morning, I said to my mother, Ma, I need an electric guitar. And she said, you do? Why? I said, because I heard a man named B.B. King on the radio, and I want to be like him. So we drove to Cambridge or Dedham to a store that's gone out of business that Broderick will remember. You grew up in Lynn?
Wakefield.
You grew up in Wakefield. You may remember LS, the S stood for sales, and I needed this electric guitar. Does anyone know the name of these two stores? Leechmere Sales. And my mother spent $89.99 on a completely unplayable electric guitar that I thought was B.B. King's. And I have played 1,000 gigs, made 2 records, and John has tried 1,000,000 cases and was a Supreme Court judge, all because of the opportunity to give these kids that second life. Yeah, life itself. We want to prevent bad stuff from happening. But I don't know about you, but I want every kid at Pinkerton and in all these schools to dream and to use her imagination and pursue that. Because I can tell you, as I met with the Governor Dummer's girls lacrosse team on Saturday, and have met with teams at Northeastern and UNH hockey and all kinds of teams, that kids don't know what's bothering them. That's why they stand up for the old guy. John has the fantasy he's younger than I, but I'm also an old guy. And as far as I know, we're the only 2 people that are telling kids, hey, you guys don't feel good, huh? And then they look up. You know, I was working a day a week at Nashua South 2 years ago, and they have a graduated lecture hall with seats like this, and they don't have enough substitute teachers. So the first period, there was 6 classes in there of kids in Nashua, where, by the way, the poverty rate is 45%, as it is in New Bedford, as it is in Manchester, as it is in all the aging cities across this country. And they were sitting there, and Phil DeRosa, the vice principal, said, boys and girls, I want you to listen to Mr. Levin. So they looked up and saw me and thought, Christ, I'm going to listen to this guy for. So they all got back on their phones. And then I said, hey, guys, listen, I want to apologize. And then their heads snapped up. And I said, hey, you're really listening. You know why I'm apologizing? This was 2 days after a guy in, I think, South Carolina went into a mosque and shot it up because he felt like it and put it on Facebook Live. Do you remember that? There was a shooting in the South. Was it South Carolina? I don't remember. What, Virginia, maybe? And I said, yeah, I want to apologize for this world where stuff like that happens, because it didn't happen when I was a kid. What else do you think I want to apologize? And they started getting into it. Global warming, you want to apologize for that? I said, yeah. You want to apologize for all the school shootings? I said, yeah. And I also want to apologize for the computer in your pocket, because John will remember this. I think your daughter's not listening, but the Catholic form of birth control, the preferred method, was known as coitus interruptus. I'm glad you're laughing. The phone causes, this is serious, the phone causes childhood interruptus. By the time you're 11, if you're looking at this infernal thing every 5 minutes and spending hours on it, and much of the stuff you see causes comparisonitis. It's not good. We have an opportunity to take back the culture that these Pinkerton kids are growing up in. All 12 of us. We start with you 12. I'm via this handout gonna explain from the perspective of a guy that's studied psychology what I think is going on. So does everybody have this hand? There will be a test on this a week from tomorrow. A lady came in a little late. Did you have the handout? Did everybody get one? It says Jeff Levin coaching on the top. Judge, have you seen an episode of Perry Mason in the last 10 years?
Have I?
Yeah. You can see it on on Amazon. Amazon Prime, jeffbezos.com. Costs you $9.99 a month. You can see Perry Mason for nothing. I'm telling you, it's excellent. So there are 3 sections of this handout, A, B, C, D, 1 through 10, and then the most important part, which says changes at the bottom. Okay? A, the overwhelming tragedy list. Global warming, phone addiction, divisiveness in all our communities, arguments, grown-ups that don't get along, school shootings, rising suicide rate. Have I missed anything? An opiate epidemic. Whose life has been touched by the opiate epidemic? Please raise your hand. That's 5 out of 12. Who's bothered by global warming? Who's bothered by school shootings, need I ask? So when things are overwhelming, what do we normally do? Who will answer? When you're overwhelmed by something, I might pick on the only couple of guys out here. Sir, what do you do when you're overwhelmed by something? You have 2 choices. Sorry? Watch sports, sweep it under the rug, or fight and deal with it. This overwhelming tragedy list is so named because it's friggin' overwhelming. And we don't know what to do about it. But the judge and I is figuring out what we can do about it. The next time we come to Pinkerton, we fill the front section. Or maybe you invite the judge and me over to the house and we have a meeting of you and all your kids' friends' parents. I don't know where this goes, but if we don't do anything, we're going to have continued problems. The opiate epidemic touched my life because Sean Gallagher from Simsbury, Connecticut, overdosed a couple of years ago. And when I was a kid, I don't know about you, but I didn't know anybody who was shooting dope. It wasn't a thing. My friend Steve Sapina, who's the principal of Wyndham High, and this is public knowledge, revived 4 9th grade girls last school year because there was fentanyl in their vapes. Right? The overwhelming tragedy list is real. This is the super depressing part of the presentation. B, the new parenting playbook. Prepare the road for your child. When I was 13, which is between the ages, I suspect, of this young lady and that young man, I decided it would be an excellent idea for me to grab one of my mother's larks. Miss Donovan might know what a lark is. What is a lark? It's not a bird. I absconded with 1 cigarette from my mother's package. I went across Southwick Road in Newton behind the biggest tree that I knew of, the one we use for hide and seek and Relievo. I thought it was about as wide as maybe 5 of these chairs. I took a book of matches. I squished the charcoal filter in the lock because that fascinated me, and I heard the sound of the charcoal filter, and I thought I was a big deal, and I lit the match like I saw Humphrey Bogart do one time in a movie, burned my ring finger on my right hand, lit a second match like I saw Humphrey Bogart do one time in maybe the Maltese Falcon, you know what I'm saying? And I started puffing on this cigarette. What's the next thing that happened? I didn't throw up, but I started coughing. I was on my way to throwing up, so if you've ever tried your first cigarette, you can enjoy those experiences. And I later got addicted to them. I put it out. I took 3 pieces of bazooka bubble gum and started chewing them. I put on my dad's cologne, maybe 5 ounces of cologne. I walked back into my mother's house, and she said to me, "So you're smoking?" I said, "Hi, hi, hi, hi." She said, "You're smoking, huh?" She says, "Yeah, Gussie O'Brien, Augustus O'Brien, Gussie called me and says she saw you behind." I wasn't smoking. I thought, this tree let me down. I mean, what happened? Now, if you see some kid in your neighborhood, do you call their mother? Or are you afraid that the mother will chew you out, right? So the new parenting playbook spells disconnection, over-trying, spells the dissolution of community. John always says he grew up in Wakefield, Mass., so he could go into his neighbor's house in the dark and not bump into anything. Why was that? Because he was in their houses all the time, because people knew one another. The new parenting playbook is a response to not dealing with the overwhelming tragedy list. You get it? I got to make sure my kid's okay. She got a C+ in AP Physics. Well, you only know that because you went on, what's the name of the portal, Aspen? This is the worst invention ever made. Let the kid grow up. John said it, right? So you get it. C, what is outcome fever? That is an unnamed condition afflicting all American children. The 2 in this room, and if they're brave, they can tell us about it. We don't know why they don't know why they're worried, but they're worried about how many likes they get on Zuckerberg.com. They're worried about, that's Facebook. He's the splendid founder of Facebook, who's only lied to Congress 3 times and been fined in the billions, and he could care less. And he keeps getting away with it. My wife goes on Facebook to talk to her friends, and I say, "Why would you support this guy?" "Oh, well, it's easy." Really? If you went down the corner store and they ripped you off every time you went in there, would you stop going in there? Right? But anyway, that's what's going on. Outcome fever is real. All these horses are out of the barn. And we have an opportunity to save lives and save kids' spirits. And D is the 6 I's. These are the things that are in short supply. This lady's studying for the test. What is the 6th I, dear? The last I. Don't get this wrong. I'll throw you out of the auditorium. Well, what? Read it for her, dear. Identity. So the first 5 I's are imagination. How else did John get to be the Supreme Court Justice? When he watched Perry Mason, he thought, I want to do that. Now there's so much noise that I'm not sure kids even know what they want, what they imagine, right? You got children, Julie? Do you have grandchildren? Do you see changes in these kids? You've been working with kids like me for a while, right? Could you stand up, and we want to give her a hand. Julie Donovan, ladies and gentlemen. Julie is the superintendent of schools, is that right? No. What's the biggest changes you see in kids? Mm-hmm. Can you hear her back there? But you've been working with kids for 30 years. if you count your parents. What's the biggest, who will volunteer? What's the biggest changes you see in your kids or kids? I'm not trying to be funny or call you out. Will anyone like to share? Don't all share at once. Biggest change, huh? Right? Stress, anxiety. They don't talk. The eye contact's down. They have outcome fever. Some of them are clinically anxious. Some of them are clinically depressed. But I think they all have outcome fever. And without these, without the 5 eyes, you're right. I've gotten 5 calls since Sunday morning at 8 about boys in their late teens and 20s who have failed to launch. I got another one on the way here from a woman in 703 area code. It's Virginia. I've memorized all the area codes. I got 2 from Florida, 1 from Seattle, and 1 from Orange County. Now, how can one guy, we need to come together and have the conversation about these first 4 items. Imagination, independence. The other night, for some reason, I was in Newton, my hometown, and I found myself late at night riding my bike down Beacon Street East towards Brookline, which I did all the time, past 10 at night, 11 at night, 8th grade, 9th grade. My mother would say, where are you going tonight? I'd say, I don't know. What are you guys doing? I don't know. She'd say, all right, well, be careful. And as I was riding my bike at age 65, I felt the same exhilaration I used to feel. Did you ride your bike around Lynn, Julie? A little bit. Did you ride your bike in Wakefield, Judge?
Absolutely, everywhere.
Did you ride your bike as a kid? It was fun, right? Imagination, independence, intestinal fortitude. Did you get in any fights as a kid, sir? No fist fights? John, did you get any fist fights as a kid? Did you get any fist fights as a kid? Julie, you gotten some fist fights? Uh-huh. Intestinal fortitude could start with G-U-T-S, but it doesn't begin with I. Get it? I sound more intelligent. If I say the 5 I's and 1 G, I look like an idiot. But if I say the 6 I's, I appear intelligent. Without the first 5 I's, your identity doesn't solidify. The next one is integrity. Yeah, you shouldn't cheat, but you should be whole as a person, and you should be kind to people, and you're supposed to believe in the golden rule. Integrity. And the last one is intimacy. Yeah, I have 1,012 friends on Instagram. John, if you drop that mic. Now, how many times can you reprimand a judge? You know what I'm saying? Judge, for God's sake, don't. I never appeared in his courtroom. The 6 I's. And I'm briefly going to talk about these 10 pieces of advice that I culled from a website the other day. I don't know why I'm coming up in these rows, but what can I tell you? Actually, can I borrow $10? This is, to me, number 1 is the most important one. Who will read number 1 out loud? Thank you so much. I'll give you an automatic A.
Number 1, don't spoil me. I know quite well that I ought not to have all I ask for. I'm only testing you.
Most kids, when I go and work with college sports teams, I always say, how many of you kids regularly vacuumed your mother's house? And the number is usually around 10, 15%. They don't know how to turn on a vacuum cleaner. 2 girls at Northeastern the other day, it was in the Globe, there were some rodents in their dormitory. They called the Boston police. What's that? Yeah, well, they didn't rush over, I can tell you that. The 6 I's are critical, the 5, and then the identity. Don't spoil your kids. You're not supposed to be their friend. right? But that's changed. That horse is out of the barn. A lot of parents are like, oh my God, I gotta sign them up for violin lessons, travel lacrosse. There's a guy in the room that knows this gentleman, but a fellow named Danny Donato coaches 3 sports at a school in Boston. And last summer I called him, I said, Danny, what are you doing? He said, I'm in Canton, New York at a baseball tournament with my 14-year-old. I said, how long did it take you to get there? He goes, I don't know, it's for, a lot of F-bombs and about 8 hours. I said, what are you doing? Why don't you go down the Cape? He goes, I don't even know what I'm doing here. Kid's 14, I drove 8 hours to make sure don't spoil kids. Don't give them every opportunity under the sun because it just creates static. The overwhelming tragedy list is bad enough. The new parenting playbook is adding to it, in my opinion. Who will read number 2 for an automatic A, sir? You need to get your average up. We know that. Would you have is that your betrothed? Would you read number 3, betrothed? I can't believe you got a 65 on this AP math test. Don't make me think my mistakes. I said, would you please read number 4, dear? Thank you. What's the most painful and awesome lesson one of you 3 ladies learned as a girl? The lady to your left is very shy. I'm not going to call. Who will take the microphone and tell us an awesome lesson that you learned as a girl? Here you go.
Oh, God. I don't know.
You learned nothing, no lessons?
Oh, we learned all kinds of lessons. I guess we learned not to drink and drive because we lost a friend in a drunk driving accident. So I think that's probably the most painful one.
Yeah. The kids don't drink and drive, right? Don't smoke weed and drive like crazy. But I think we've learned that lesson. But is there a less dramatic sort of lesson?
I don't know. It was a long time ago.
Not as long as it was. I learned when my mother said, so you smoke, and I learned that I live in a community where people care about their health. You know what I'm saying? So I take the mic away from you.
Did you want to sing the national anthem? Coach, would you mind reading number 5?
Don't make rash promises. Remember that I feel badly let down when promises are broken.
Miss Donovan, would you read number 6? Oh, you do not have a paper in front of you. Here's the paper. Oh my God. Here, you.
I could do it without the glasses. What are we on, 5?
6.
Okay. Don't put me off when I ask questions. If you do, you will find that I stop asking and seek my information out.
That's a great one. Thank you. Do you have your glasses with you?
I do.
Good. Keep that hand up. Please, there'll be a test a week from tomorrow. Who will volunteer to read the next one? I believe we're on number 7. How about the lady in the back there? Could you read 7? Could you read 8, dear? I know you're a little shy, but thank you.
Don't tell me my fears are silly. They're terribly real. And you can do much to reassure me if you try to understand.
That's a critical one. If all these kids have outcome fever and they're afraid of failing, you got to start listening to that. You can no longer say, don't be silly, you'll do better next time. No, shut the phones off and say, hey, sweetie, what's going on with you? You seem really nervous. That's why they applaud for John, right? Could you read the next one, dear? Thank you. Yeah. And the last one, don't forget that I can't survive without lots of understanding and love. So please take this handout. And now Julie has prepared some hors d'oeuvres. Do you have the hors d'oeuvres? I mean, we could take a little break. What time is it? We're almost out of time. Is it 7:25? Is that clock right? So this meeting is supposed to end. I didn't time this well. The changes, the opportunities that we have, I listed. Make sure your kids have fun. Remember that? Fun. Son, did you have a lot of fun today? What was the funnest thing you did today? Play lacrosse, practice after school? Nice. Fun. Spend time and pay attention to your kids. Do something about the screens. Are you related to this lady, son? If she said, we're not going to have any screens on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 7 until bedtime, what would be your reaction? Put that knife away. What? Would you have a hard time with that? Is he telling the truth, Mom? He would not have a hard time with it? Turn the screens off in your house on a surprise basis and on a ritual basis, and listen to your children. The younger they are, the more likely they will be to talk to you. But even if they're teenagers, insist. Modeling and really listening means don't have an iPhone in one hand while you're talking to your child, ever. Put the phone down, just like your mother did. Just like your dad did. Put the phone down. Coach, did you drop a $100 bill? Oh, what did she drop? What's that green thing? Plastic brain? That's a future neurosurgeon. You better give it back to her. She's got her hand. There you go. Oh, stress ball. I need about 6 of those. Modeling and next steps. This is what I really want to ask. Does anyone have an idea what we should do next? Yes, ma'am. The kid suggested it. What's his first name? Oh, okay. Let's call him Timmy. Timmy said, Ma, we should have dinner together. If we listen to the kids, they'll tell us what they need. What else should we do? You know, I got a call on you. I love it. Talk to neighbors, spread the word. The judge and I would love to come back. John predicted 9 people would be here. I predicted 11, so I win the bet. But next time, if we are invited back, my wife and I founded the Reconnection Project. You can look it up. It works with educators, parents, and kids. Why would we wait until something awful happens, right? But something awful is happening. You know, when John talks, I look at the room, everybody's listening. You guys know the kids aren't okay, right? They're not okay. It's time for us to take back the culture. John, I put John's phone number on here. I put John's email, JTB. John Thomas, is it Thomas, Judge? Your middle name Thomas? Your middle name Thomas? Oh, Timothy. I put JNL, Jeffrey Nathan Levin, my phone, my email. We would love to come back and meet here in your living room with all your kids, friends, parents. If we don't hear from anybody, I tell you what, I'll drive up 93 tonight and I'll look at my phone later and my computer and pray that I hear from somebody in this audience. Because if we do nothing, we are just choosing to systematically let these kids swim in an ocean of outcome fever. And I don't know about you, but I'm getting damn sick of it. Because the thing is solvable. It's not rocket science. We have to bring the community back together, and it starts with adults. Timmy Powers is the principal of this school, right? He grew up with my buddy Serpina. I don't know if Powers played football, but Timmy Powers, he's a good man. But it's difficult for educators to say, hey, time out, we have a crisis. It's difficult for educators to say time. Am I right, Julie? It's a hard thing to do. But we have a crisis. Judges hugged 4,000 kids. I've been to too many friggin' funerals. I talk to kids all the time, and they say to me, Levin, you helped me when I was a kid, and I should be retiring. I'm 107 years old. Can you see the wrinkles in my face? Don't say yes. I literally cannot retire. The only thing I'm good at is working with young people. And we have to get this project off the ground. Are there any questions? Yes. Well, you let Tim Powers know that we'd like to. You let Tim Powers know that we'd like to. Or if you know anybody on the school committee or anybody, or Julie, you can let Tim Powers know that the judge and I would love to come down. You second that idea? Why do you think that is, dear? And it's not just Derry, right? It used to be those were our kids. Those are Derry kids, right? We're all, it's nobody's fault, really. We're all so friggin' busy. That's not a swear, is it, Julie? We're all so friggin' busy, and we've lost track of the right thing to do for kids. I'm convinced of it. And I appreciate it. We'd love it, yes. In Boston. Can you hear her?
My son was because he had a foot allergy, and it was so depressing as a parent. I sit there, and the whole emergency room was full of girls. They were being drugged on a drug party that was on a cross street in Boston. Constantly. Most of them, they were being run in state because the last one was why you drugged them. And it was so crazy that, I sit there as a parent, I'm like, how come any of the parents maybe not even talk to the girls about burgers parties for being careful what you're taking? One of the kids asked, came in with a girl. I said, hey, what happened? Oh, they were giving free drinks. She took a couple. And she walked in and she's like, out of it. And her parents, she's from California. I was like, oh my goodness, great.
College student in Boston. You know, there are more disgruntled predatory people per capita in this society now. I'm convinced of it. Why would Stevie Serpina at Wyndham High revive 4 ninth-grade girls with fentanyl in their vape pens? Who puts fentanyl in a vape pen outside of a sociopath? And I think there are more people like that. But the problem can be solved with the advent of community again. I wish there would be 1,000 people in here. I wish you'd call Timmy Powers and say, you got to get the judge and Jeff down here. If 5 of you call, he'll pay attention. I mean, he's a good guy. He went to St. A's with my buddy Serpina. I think he played football. I don't know. Tim Powers. He's a big dude, right? But it's very hard for a guy in these positions to say, we have a crisis at Pinkerton. But we have the same crisis in Wakefield, in Lynn, in Newton. Where'd you grow up, dear? Manchester, I was with Sean. We were with Sean St. Ange at Memorial the other day. You went to Memorial? So Principal Adamakos was the boss. Where'd you go to high school, sir? You went here. Do you think the kids are in trouble? Yeah, I think they all are. Some less than others. Did you go to Pinkerton, the betrothed? RS Central. Nice. Yeah. No, we can do this. Any other ideas? Julie wants to serve those hors d'oeuvres, the pigs in blankets and the lovely water chestnuts wrapped in bacon. Did you make those? NAMI is giving out stress brains? Julie, are you grant funded? Are you grant funded? So you're in the budget, you're a prevention counselor. You have kids that help you teach.
Yeah, they teach suicide prevention in the classroom and teach other youth how to teach.
Any other ideas before? We gotta let the judge have his final comments. And we'll hang around after you want to shoot the breeze, but please help us. If you go on the website, you'll see the Reconnection Project. My wife keeps my website and tries to keep me honest. It's a homegrown operation to go school by school, community by community, and get grown-ups having this conversation. The children, and they'll tell us what we need to do. I have no question about it. Any final questions or thoughts? Yes. You want to sing the anthem? I think you approach the subject as follows, guys. We're going to have a favorite meal. We're going to have a meeting during dinner or after dinner. We're going to talk about how you guys are really doing, and it's not optional. Your father and I really we went to this lecture up at school. John, have you spoken at Pinkerton? How many years ago, Julie? 4 years ago, Julie's saying. So they wouldn't know the judge. But if you email me, I can send you his presentation on video. I mean,
We have a couple of younger kids that aren't basically yet, so.
it's time to talk to them.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious if you call me and say, can you and the judge come down? I'm going to get some of my girlfriends and maybe the husbands if they're, and sit and talk with kids. This is a movement we're trying to get going to save kids from the jaws of outcome fever. And we want your help. That's it. And we want the kids' help too. You know, when we talk to kids, they're always lining up. What can I do? The two kids in that video, Eli and Isaac, Eli goes to Northeastern, calls me twice a week, 11, when are we gonna get this going? There have been 3 suicides at Northeastern. I work with 6 sports teams there. I ask all of them, has your life been touched by the suicide of a friend? It's 50 to 60% of college kids. It's not okay. It's overwhelming. It's dark to hear it, but there's a solution. It's not rocket science. Anything else before I give the mic? Well, John has a mic. We'll give him the final word. Judge, you want the final word? This is the closing argument. Perry Mason. Your mic's not on. I think you might have broken it. Your mic's not on. Here, take this. Oh, say, no, just kidding.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. I want to leave you with 2 little vignettes that I hope you take home with you. They are real stories and they involve real children. And they make Jeff's point. The first point is about outcome fever. There are more kids dying in America, by the way, from outcome fever than COVID. Jeff and I went out to Nantucket last November. If you go to Nantucket in November, they think you're serious because you can't use the beach. So we spoke to K through 8. It was a beautiful early November day. We were sitting out back of the school with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And when I tell you the question that we asked them, I'd like you to answer it just silently. 6th, 7th, and 8th graders on Nantucket Island. I said to them, if I could promise you an 89 on your next test, you can pick the subject. You don't have to study any more than you've already studied. Or you can study all night long before the test, and you'll get a 90. How many of you would study all night long? Every hand went up. Every hand went up. I know how I would have answered it. And when the hands went down, a little boy raised his hand. He said, what would I need to do to get 100 I said, that wasn't part of my question. He would have studied for a week, probably. What is that? Second story is, before COVID struck, my wife and I went out to dinner in a kind of an ordinary restaurant, good food, but not fancy. And we were 15 minutes from ending our meal, and my wife said, look at that family. They just come in. Mother, father, in their early 40s, I would say. They had 4 daughters. The oldest looked to be about 14. And they just sat down when I looked over. And every member of that family, every single one of them, was on their device. The parents weren't talking, the kids weren't talking, nobody was looking at anybody. They were all glued to their devices. It's called alone together. That's where we've evolved here, alone together. When I was a kid, if we went out to dinner, which wasn't often, that was a big deal. I used to listen to my parents talk. They'd talk to my sister. It was an event. Apparently not so much now. I see couples out having dinner, and they're on their iPhones. What is that? When I was leaving the restaurant, I was tempted to stop and say to the father, they have takeout here, you know? You don't have to pay a tip. If you'd done what I'd done for the last 6 years, you'd be as impatient for change as I am. Or we can say, well, that's a social, cultural, that's a big issue. We can't deal with that. That's one answer. I hope it's not your answer, because I'm convinced we can deal with it, but not in silence, not in auditoriums that are filled to 1/50th of their capacity. And I'm grateful that you're here. Please understand that. I admire you. And anyone who stayed in and tuned in, I admire them too. But nothing will change because I think it should change or Jeff thinks it will change. It will change when you think it should change. And I know if this place were filled with kids, they would say, I agree with those two people. I agree with what they're saying. I know that. In any event, thank you for inviting us, Julie. Thank you very much. If we can ever come back, be happy to come back. Anyway, drive safely. Thank you. These cards are out there, by the way. It's the 5 most common signs of mental health problem, not diagnostic. We've given out 475,000 of these cards. I don't mean drop them from a helicopter. I mean giving them out. I'd love you to take one. I'd love you to put it on your refrigerator. I'd love you to learn it. And then I'd like you to flip it over and see how you react, or should react, when you find the signs. The one thing we shouldn't do is pretend we don't see it. That doesn't help anybody. Anyway, thanks very much.